All
Okay.
right. So my name is Michael Serrano, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. For me, that means I haven't used a mind-altering substance since October 1st, 2014. And I'm the Facilitated Development Coordinator for the CCAR training team. And I decided to name the webinars Buddha's webinars because Art took pride in doing these webinars. And I wanted to shed light to him with these webinars, and just name him after him, and then have you guys facilitate, right? And you guys can make his name reign on, you know. And I
Mhm.
appreciate you guys. So today we have continue the book, Phil Valentine's book. I know most of you guys, I know you guys read it. You guys are here with questions, right? So we're gonna have some questions for Phil Valentine, and he's gonna have some answers. Not only that, but we want to hear some things, some parts. I really want to know about feelings, right? Because as I read the book, I noticed that you were in different type of feelings at different times,
Mhm.
and me reading it, I speak for myself when I'm doing me reading it. I felt those feelings as well.
Mhm.
So I had a pleasure of like getting into the stories why you, when you was telling them. So I appreciate. So I just thought about. I know people had questions because I have a few questions myself. So
Well, thank you, Michael. It's still for me. It's still. I'm just in much disbelief that I actually hiked the Appalachian Trail, and that B, that I have a book that I can actually hold in my hand and like say, I wrote that. It's like incredible to me. I don't even know really all this time later, don't even really know how that happened, except to say that it was very spirit led. It was a very spiritual experience for me, from the time I was lying in bed in recovery from treatment for stage 4 cancer, where I heard that whisper, I want you to walk the Appalachian Trail, to the time where I stood on the mountain 5 years later, terrified, basically frozen in place and couldn't even figure out how I was going to take the first step. And the whisper came again, continue, which ended up being the name of the book. And yeah, there were a lot of trials and tribulations and uh, ecstasy at times, and just all kinds of things throughout that. And it really mirrored not only a recovery journey for me, but it mirrored a life journey for me as well. That the trail became symbolic of just a long journey. You know what I find really interesting is I talk a little bit about when I stepped onto the Appalachian Trail a couple times before I actually set out on the entire journey. Is that as soon as I stepped on the trail, it like thrummed for me. That
mm,
that it was like electrical energy current, that was like you were walking almost like on an electrical wire. And today I think about stepping on the trail and I still have that feeling. So I stepped on the trail probably 3 or 4 times, maybe a few more times. Um, and I still get that energy. It's like, it's almost my feet and my soul almost like connect right to the ground when I step on the trail. It's like, and I become alive, that I just want to hike that trail again. I'm contemplating retirement and looking, probably within 2 years, I'll be retired. And I wonder if there's another one. Oh, soul equals soul. You, that was like wild. Wow. All right, so I'm done. I don't need to hear anything more or read anything more. That sole of your foot equals the soul. For me, when I hit the trail, that is definitely true. So, and I also had well, it was really a lot of fun. Khalees asked me a few questions in a recent webinar as well that was recorded. So I know she has a lot of questions. I don't know really where to start. We'll just see where this goes. Michael, you're kind of the co-host and the facilitator. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, definitely. So I would ask any of you guys, you know how that whole action button works, raising your hand function,
Reactions?
the reaction buttons.
Yeah,
There you go, Don, aka Santa.
I don't know who Don is, but Santa's here to ask a question from Phil. No, but in all seriousness, it's pretty amazing that you could take this experience that was months and shrink it down into the book. I'm wondering, what did you leave out? What got cut for time? What was a little bit wacky, you know?
That's a good question.
Yeah. So it's hard to remember what I cut out, you know, or what I left out. I reworked it a couple times, and there was a lot of times I got too much into the logistical stuff, you know, like where I camped or where I set up or those types of things. I don't think I left. I tried to take, and I'm looking at Megan because she always talks about the grit in storytelling, right? So the moments that were grittiest, I purposefully left in and wrote about. The parts where I fell, I was scared, I was hurt, I wanted to quit, I was angry, I was frustrated, I was judgmental. I wanted to leave all those things in. I don't think there's, you know, so it's hard to, that's a hard question. There's nothing really, if anything really wacky happened, I would have left it in. You know, I think I might have, and it's amazing how when you're writing something and you've rewritten it 4 or 5 times, the thought that goes into each little episode or little sub chapters, I called them, or little, you know, so I could have said a lot about the drinking on the trail, but I think I said enough, you know, that there was and the parts that really bugged me, and I talked about it once, was like when people glorify their drinking, like they go out, they black out, they're driving cars or they're talking about the stuff they did, and they're laughing about it uproariously, right? They think it's just the funnest and funniest thing. And I think it bugs me so much because I was that exact same dude, you know, all those years ago when I was drinking so heavily and we thought it was so much fun. I don't remember coming over and knocking on your window at 3 a.m. You know, I could have wrote more about that, but again, that was purposeful. I did leave out one grisly part where a bear attacked me and ate chopped my leg off from my shin down. I didn't leave that part out. So that's a good question because Khalees asked me the same question too, and I don't even know if I don't remember what I said, because that's like kind of like asking me what I don't know. You know, so there was nothing really intentional about that. So thanks. What do you think, Megan?
I have so many questions. And not the least of which are like storyteller to storyteller kind of questions. But I think that, you know, one of the things that I see throughout, not just the book, but the process, is just courage. And so I think about, you know, the courage to answer the call, the courage that it took to you know, get on the mountain, and then having all of those doubts, get on the trail and have all those doubts and step through those. And then the courage to write the book, which is a courageous act. It's a vulnerable thing to do. And it takes so much commitment through so much doubt, at least if it were me, that's what it would be. And I remember that you called me a few years ago and read a chapter to me. And even that, when I reflect on that, the courage of the vulnerability, to walk through the vulnerability of sharing something so personal that you've written that, isn't out in the world yet. And I still reflect and I'm like, oh, did I do a good job in holding that space for you? And I don't think I did. And because it felt such a significant act, I know that if I share something that's unfinished or still in process in my writing or my storytelling, it feels incredibly vulnerable. And then the courage, of following through with it all. So I'd love to hear about courage. And there's one other sort of piece to this, part 2 of that, is what in the book took the most courage to include? What was the scariest or
Whoa.
most vulnerable piece that you put in that took courage to include in there?
Gotcha. Yeah, well, thank you for that. Sometimes, I've always defined courage as it's not being free from fear, right? A courage is being fearful and doing it anyway. So that's really all how I've always kind of looked at courage. And oh yeah, I could identify the fear at different times, right? Sometimes it surfaced in anxiety, sometimes it was legitimate, like okay, if I don't get off of Mount Washington right now, there's a good chance I could die up here. So I think I should probably get down. It occurs to me if I just laid here, I'm not going to come off of this mountain, but anything but a body bag. So that's almost like necessity. Sometimes too, the trail provides you could succumb to the fear, but really a lot of times for me, fear immobilizes me. And so the only way you're going to get anywhere is to continue, really, is to take another step. I'm not going to get to the road unless somebody's going to hike up and drag me out on a stretcher or a helicopter or something. So, and I think also for me, if I'm looking about the process of writing the book, it took 7 years. Sometimes fear manifests itself in me in procrastination. And then it comes to the point where I just get really pissed off. Like the fear gets me angry, like, you got to do this. And one of the reasons I finished was really, I got angry at my procrastination, and wow, I didn't even, is that my parents didn't get to read the book because I took so long. And so I had to finish it because I was just pissed that I let my procrastination get the better of me and I didn't finish the book. And it took them both dying for me to get angry enough and motivated enough to finish it. So I hadn't shared that with anyone until right today. So, you talk about creating space, Megan, that's what you're really good at. So, I think the part that took the most courage to write about was the dynamic that Sandy and I had with me hiking with female hikers. And of course, I already posted the horse lady review on Amazon, who kind of jumped all over that. And Sandy was like, see, I told you. I said, and then she went and visited our son and daughter-in-law. And the daughter-in-law was like grilling Sandy about, that piece. And how could you let him write? And like she kind of assumed that we hadn't talked about it at length. Like I wasn't going to publish anything now. Like like Sandy vehemently opposed. She goes, all right, I'm good with it, because she had her chance to write her piece. She saw how it plays out at the end, you know, that she fell in love with the, and again, it's this notion about, you know, because she wrote that long email that I included about early on sharing a room with a female hiker, right? But if you noticed, at the end of there was like 3 women and me in like 2 beds. One of them was my daughter, which people could take all kinds of like weird, kinky, weird ways. But that's what's really kind of odd about our society, is that, you know, there's even a story like Abraham Lincoln sharing a bed with a roommate who was male, but they don't jump into the gay, homophobe, or whatever kind of stuff or anything like that. It was just 2 people sharing a room that shared a bed. It wasn't a big deal, right? But now we have over hypersexualized everything. So people rarely understand that, like filial love, where it's brotherly, sisterly love. It's almost like, and it could be also storge. They became like family. You know, like a Paradox was like my trail daughter in a lot of ways, and Rocksteady was my trail sister. We just hiked alone together, you know, and so I knew that was going to raise some ruffles, but I wanted to do that because it was my story, it was our truth, and it was, as far as like romantic or erotic or sexual, it was completely innocent. It was more about just mutual respect for hiking with one another and understanding all that. We were on the same page. So that was probably the part that I think was a little courageous, and I had to really check that out with Sandy, because she wondered about it too. Go ahead.
Can I say something else?
Yeah.
Because of course I could talk about storytelling the whole time, but I'm not going to. But I just want to sort of highlight, you know, that's authentic storytelling, is that you consider how people might take it, but you're just telling your truth. Like you just said, this was just our truth, and that's such a powerful way to share, because it allows others to see us, you know, sort of simply and plainly, and also to have permission to do the same. And I think that that's one of the things that was really strong in the book, is just the authenticity of your style of writing. Is just, this is what happened. You know, these are the little kind of jokes that I made with myself about it. You know, you mentioned about the emotions, and, you know, I think you spoke to that. It was a deliberate choice to include feelings on the trip. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about sort of what makes you choose that, or why is that important to you? Why do you think it was important to the book?
So many of the trail books I've read were more about logistics, stories that happened to them, encounters they had, but rarely. And I think Jennifer Farr Davis, who had the fastest known time for like 13 years on the Appalachian Trail, she wrote a book called Becoming Odessa. And she was the first person I had read that actually talked about some of the internal stuff that was going on. In her book too, she talked about coming across in New Jersey at one of the pavilions that trail goes through, that someone had hung themselves and committed suicide, and she found the body, you know. So talk about an emotional, and at that spot is where there's actually a picture of me kneeling down to pray at that spot too, where she found the body, found the young man actually. So you know, one of the things I do regret that is is I discovered the feeling wheel after I wrote the book, because I would have had a lot more words to use. So, because we don't have many words to capture our emotions or our feelings in the English language, and some of them weren't quite the right word. And I use thesaurus and synonyms and all that kind of stuff to find other words. I was trying to dive into myself and put myself in that spot at that time and identify those feelings. So recovery is a journey of self-awareness, and the more self-aware I become, the more I heal. And so it was a process for me as well to identify feelings. So in some ways it was purposeful so that I could identify what I was doing. It helped my recovery. And then I was hopeful that people could connect to the feelings, which would bring the book and the story to a different level for people. Because I think we don't pay enough attention to emotion. When I was writing the blogs, like I wrote before, I tried to tap into the emotion I was feeling when I saw, whether it was love or fear, or just tap into the emotion, because I think that's also the essence of storytelling, and it's the essence of writing, at least for me.
Anybody else? Anybody else got questions? I can see Nathan. Nathan has a question.
I have a load. I'm just trying to compose myself. I think, well, one thing you just said that really resonated with me was when you said you hiked alone together.
Yeah.
Because I said to my husband, I said, I know this is the right relationship with me because I can be in a room alone together with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's such significance in that feeling of comfort, but being okay with just being who you are and what you're doing. I've mentioned to you before that I'd never heard that term, spiritual shivers. And I think we get gut feelings and intuition. And so what made that spiritual shiver different from a gut feeling, intuition? Yeah. And then I got a follow-up question.
Well, for me, so it's all soul related. It's like soul energy. So kind of like when a gut feeling, intuition is like internal, right? Like deep inside. And sometimes the shivers almost feel external, like somebody came in and touched my soul from outside of my soul, and it just goes woo and vibrates. And a lot of times it's like goose pimples and your hair stands on end, and that can emanate from internally, but it's also, I think it's generated from a power greater than myself or outside myself. So does that make any sense? I mean, it's hard to explain, but it's more intense.
Yeah. And then the other bit to this is I still feel very much that I'm on a spiritual journey and figuring that out, and it changes what it looks like. What changed about your spirituality from before to after? Or if nothing.
Oh no, it changed. I just need a minute to think about it. Let me put it this way. I had this notion, right, that when I got into recovery, and I read the 12 steps and I found out that God was the answer, my initial and deep core reaction was thank God, because I thought I had tried everything else. So I was very curious about how these AA people were going to talk about or think about God, right? They talked about it as a higher power. And so I pursued that for many years. I tried different things, New Age stuff and the masters. And then I had a vision where Jesus came to me on a beach, and I really pursued Christianity, right? So I just dove into that, and Sandy and I got super involved with churches, with a church, and our kids thrived. And many of you know I have a daughter in Nairobi who's a missionary teacher, and then I read this book by Rob Bell, Velvet Elvis, Repainting the Christian Faith. And he tells the story about going to a U2 concert, and he was very much he was a pastor's kid, and very much restriction. Like, if you go to a U2 concert, that's like secular, satanic music. Don't go there, you heathen kind of thing. But when he went to the concert, he was filled with ecstasy, and he knew that to be a true feeling. It wasn't, he had a hard time believing it was satanic. So he went and he pursued the early scripture, he pursued all these things, and he came to the conclusion that God, as he understood him, which could be the Trinity, right? It could be Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, was in anything true, good, and beautiful. So, however, so what it did was, he also talked about, and I think I've written about this, is that when I heard that, it was like this box I was trying to put my Christian religion and Christian God in. The walls just went boom, boom, and folded down. And the notion I kind of had was that Jesus, when he came to knock down walls, knock down barriers, not build them. And and this is my personal opinion, is that now we're talking about rebuilding all those walls and all our faiths and all our churches and all that they're just walls that constrict us and put these rules on us. And when I went out into the wilderness, really, the trail for 6 months, my spirituality the connection was almost mystical, magical, that the pipeline to my creator, which I will still say is Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, just because all I saw around me was truth, goodness, and beauty. I was surrounded by it daily, whether it was the beauty in the soul walking with me, the person I was talking to, the mountainscape, the mushroom coming out of everything was true, good, and beautiful. And when you're immersed in that for 6 or 7 months, how can you not be affected? And so I think what it did was make me more of a strategic leader. I became more patient. I became more strategic. I became more intentional. I also realized when my iPhone battery inside was getting into the red and I needed to step away, whatever that might look like. So I've been taking better care of myself too over the last 7 years. That was a long answer to a simple question. Did you have a follow-up? Did you say you had no?
No, that was my follow-up. What
Okay.
changed? Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Khalees, what's happening?
So I feel like my question kind of touches on both of those things you just mentioned. I feel like I was very fortunate because after I spoke to you, I came home and Sandra Losti was at my house, and Sandra Losti has walked the El Camino, which I'd spoken to you about walking. And so I ended up having long stories with her, of course, and being curious. But y'all, from both of you, what I'd heard whenever I was speaking to y'all after y'all walked your hikes was a lot of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the way that y'all speak about self-awareness is different than what I've heard other people speak about when it comes to self-awareness. And so I guess my question would be, do you feel like people can connect or get that self-awareness in other ways if hiking isn't something they want to explore. Or,
I don't know. I think there's a reason like all the Aborigines go on a walkabout.
Yeah.
I think there might be you know, and before we had all these modes of transportation, and people walked just about everywhere, like Jesus walked just about everywhere, right? So even there's something to say about, you know, maybe there is a lot to that soul equals soul, right? But your question is, can people become self-aware without going on a hike? I think the hike and the walk heightens your ability to become self-aware because life is so simplified and you're just alone with yourself. There's very few distractions. It allows you to dive internally. So self-awareness is more about the willingness and the courage to dive internally, to process the emotions that are running through you at any given time, right? A lot of times we feel something, we either react or we just push it aside. We don't acknowledge, what was that? What happened? What did I just feel? What's going on? So the trail and when you're walking slows you down. I think I even mentioned, right, that somebody could ask me a question on the trail. I could be walking with a rock steady, who, by the way, walked the El Camino the fall before she started the Appalachian Trail. She's incredibly self-aware. Everybody on the trail was incredibly self-aware. So it just allows you, it slows you down enough. And when you're talking to somebody like a rock steady, I'd ask her a question and she didn't respond for like 10, 15 minutes. And it was okay. I didn't have to say like, did you hear me? Did you get that question? Did you get my text? Did you get that email? Did you get my friend request? No, you know, there wasn't like this anxiety or urgency about it. I just knew she was thinking about it because she thought enough of the question that it was a good enough question that she wanted to respond after she had processed it for a while. It's kind of like what we, you know, when we wrote letters back in the day, some of us are old enough to remember when we wrote letters. You wrote a letter to somebody, if you got one with it back and within 6 weeks, you were like, wow, I got a letter. And it was well written and thoughtful. If you read any letters from like the Civil War era, where like soldiers wrote back home or home wrote back to soldiers, they are beautiful. The language is incredible. Well, now we got like, you know, this shorthand, really, like text messaging and emails. It's a bunch of shorthand and not really the in-depth or the thought put to what we used to do as people years ago. But talk about, you just took me down a side trail, if you will. One of those blue blaze trails to the lookout, you know, that I didn't want to go down too often, but anyway.
Thank you. So one more just to touch on, because this was you. I love that even whenever I spoke to you, we talked about the character strengths somebody comes back with, and then they can apply that to their role, their work, their life, etc. And you speak about being a more strategic leader. And I just really would love to hear more about other character strengths you feel like you brought back with you.
Yeah, so patience was way more patient. So more, which means I will take time to respond. You know, especially if something is complicated, complex, or emotionally charged. So I think it was just of soaking your soul in nature. You just become more peaceful, right? And that really hasn't left me. There's times where I'm not as peaceful as I'd like, but overall I can remain pretty calm. Sometimes I'm just venting and it's like you're just letting off steam, but you know, you still have this calm center and calm core. It's hard for me, and I think it's hard for people in general to say what their strengths are. And you know, it's not an ego thing. It's more of a, you just have them, so you don't know that you have them until somebody points them out to you. And I don't think we do a real good job of pointing out to each other what each other's strengths are. So we've had exercises where I say, like, Megan, I'll just use you, Megan, that you have an amazing sense of humor. And she might not have known that. She probably does, but she might not have known that because it's just an example, right? That, and I see that as a real strength, because if you have an amazing sense of humor, you're taking things not so seriously. You're taking things lightly. So I've always said this, and I was aware of this because I think a board member told me. I think my self-awareness is a strength. And I think I have the ability to, it's a lot like trails, right? That you get to a certain point and you have to consider all your options. So when you're in the role of an executive director, you usually have many options. So I have the ability now to pick an option, see what door is opened, if you will, and then the courage to walk through it, right? So some people get to see that they see what they ought to do, but they still don't do it because they don't have the courage to do that. And then I think the other part is I've talked a lot about this. Leadership, the primary purpose of a leader is to create other leaders. And in all my heart and soul, I don't want to be in the limelight. I don't want to be the one that's out there leading. I want other people to be the leaders. I want to be their support behind the scenes. I want to say, you can do it, go do it. How can I help you do it? You know, I don't need to take credit for what other people do, you know, and Tom Koyas talks a lot about generativity, right? And Art Woodard talked a lot about that before he passed, about what is it we leave behind? Is it we're generating? What is it for future generations? And that it's about also then what do we give away? You know, so Don Koyas is entering a period in his life, he's trying to figure out what he gives away. And when you're considering whether you should give it away or not, you probably should, especially if it's going to leave a little claw marks. But anyway. All right, you guys got me, I'm all emotional now, but Brian, I'm sure you're going to hit me with something too.
Good morning. Good
Good
morning.
morning.
I'm grateful to be here, and I'm glad that you're doing this because, you know, I have, you know, I have the ability. I mean, when I was reading the book, I was texting you, and you know what I mean. And I was like, I got so many questions. You should do Q&A. But anyways, so, and I do have a lot of questions, but there's one that's burning in my mind right now. And so I know that you and we talked a little bit, and you know, talked about, you talked a lot about you know, the spirituality of that piece, and sometimes fear, you know what I mean, along that journey. So I think the one thing that's in my mind is was anything revealed to you along that journey spiritually that you are still fearful of today?
I'm not afraid of anything, Brian.
It's good.
No, I really, and I try to, I have some things, you know, fear comes in different ways, but the type of fear that would cripple me, I'll say fear still shows up, right? But I can't think of anything like if that showed up at my doorway or something that it would make me afraid, except for maybe zombies. So I'm still afraid of zombies. Um, but and I was pretty good at this before the trail. I am absolutely free from worry. And a lot of times worry is the thing that stokes fear, right? And worry is also a symptom of fear. I don't worry about anything. And that's, playing the what if game. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? It's usually a bad outcome. It's fruitless. I can't even possibly predict how many bad outcomes. I mean, you could play that game all day long if you wanted. I don't do that and I never really did, but I'm free from worry. And I have kids all over the place, right? I have a kid in Chicago, in Nairobi, in Boston now, Lexington. They're all over. I could spend all day worrying about my kids. But I can't, it's not a good use of my time. Why would I cripple myself with worry and fear? Some people really, when I talk about the trail, talked about like, did you carry a gun? What am I gonna do with a gun? And besides, it's like 5 or 6 pounds. Why am I gonna have 5 or 6 pounds to my pack? And who am I going to use a gun on? It's probably going to be another person. And then I'm in all kinds of trouble, right? It's not like I'm going to have to shoot a bear, especially on the Appalachian Trail. The bears are they are so cool to see. I talked a lot about the mother cub and the mother and her 2 cubs that she was using me to train her cubs. We had like a mutual understanding. So I can't even think about anything I would, the fear of falling is still, it's a respect now. So, and I don't think I would be climbing any cell phone towers or anything like that in the near future. I would avoid heights like that. I don't want to be out there dangling on anything. So maybe I'm still a little afraid of that, but it's also knowing that I've become a little clumsy and the potential to fall is real. That's an interesting question, Brian. Thank you. Sandra.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi.
My question is, well, I've a comment to make about you two. The idea that Bono and you two could be anyway satanic just makes me laugh. Like,
right.
those dudes are so far away from that, it's not even funny.
Yeah.
But they are Irish, I suppose, so there's probably a bit of demon stuff in them. I totally get that. My question, Phil, is, and I'm only kind of at the start of the book. I'm just past the bit about what you talked about earlier with you and Sandy and sharing the room and that. So I'm only just past that bit. But my question is, your why for doing it to answer the call. So I totally get that. You hear a call, you answer it, and you go and do it. I totally understand that. But over time, has that why become more apparent, or has it developed more, or has it moved into something that you couldn't possibly have foreseen when you first got the call? Does that make sense?
Reframe it for me.
Okay. So if you answered the call, you did the Appalachian Trail, and your why for doing that was to answer the call, and it was important to you. Has anything else, I suppose, been revealed as to why you needed to do that over time, and particularly in the last 7 years since you finished it?
Well, so the board, like I talked about, decided that they would pay my salary while I was hiking the trail, right? Which is like, and they said, and it was, I remember John Hamilton, Tom Kirk, they were both saying, we believe you will come back a better leader. and you've done so much for CCAR, and you have done, they framed it in the terms of like a sabbatical. You've been with us for so long that you've earned this. And I had never considered that. And so they were also smart. This is one of those things that by saying that to me, they realized that they had me for a while. That I couldn't like just come back from the trail and say, oh, that was great. See ya, I'm gonna go hike another trail now. No, I had a debt, and it's a debt I pay willingly and gratefully of what they did for me, of giving service back to CCAR. So that was all spiritually connected too. And since we've been back, you know, we've opened things like the Emergency Department Recovery Coach Program, where we're now in 28 of 32 hospitals, and we've seen 20,000 individuals. So talk about a spiritual ripple effect that, you know, because I came back and I was in probably full of like trail, you know, still light and love and spirit, and was at an alcohol and drug policy council meeting. I told the story that I had told for 15 years, and all of a sudden it was listened to. And 3 months later, they said, we have $400,000. How much do you think you can do with that to start the program? I said, I think we can do a lot. And we went from there. That was all generated by answering the call that I couldn't have possibly foreseen, right? And just look back in awe of. And now we're doing the same type of work in the Department of Correction. What's going to happen there? I have no idea. But it's just these seeds that were planted. I think too that I had a sense of this when I started. But what is, holy crap, you're going to just ask me questions. And this is just love, guys. But what's it going to mean to my kids? I don't know. What's it going to mean to my grandkids? I knew that, but if I could do it, that they would have a dad or a grandfather that said, oh my God, my dad was 55 years old. He was like not in really good shape, and he did the Appalachian Trail. Can I go take this interview and do well? Yeah, I think I can. Like Matthew, he's like, probably know I'm not going to get this job, but I'm going to go for the interview anyway. And I might have a crack because I give really good interviews, you know, and I'm like, where do you get that stuff? And I got my daughter, Mary, who's thriving in Boston and going to like the, you know, the museums and looking at art and exploring our world. And my crazy daughter Samantha is like sleeping with hippos and hippos are the other side of a little barbed wire fence. I'm like, maybe I didn't want to spur that much adventure in my kids, but I don't know what that ripple effect is, but it has to go exactly what Megan talked about and asking about courage is that, you know, it helps with people's anxieties and fears when they see this story, that a person that fully admits their own fear, their own anxiety, their own doubt, and goes forward anyway, one person's story is maybe I can do that too. Maybe I can. Yeah, Megan.
Well, that makes me think about legacy and sort of what you hope the legacy of the book itself would be. And there was a second part to that. I already lost it, but just thinking about.
Let me answer the first one because it's pretty simple for me. I have no legacy. I've finished. So the book is out there, and I wrote it as a gift to my kids. And I wrote it for those that were fully behind me and supported me and followed me in the walk. And then where it goes from there, I'm perfectly open to. I'm open to the outcome. I'm definitely not attached.
So you answered part of I remembered what it was, which is why you wrote the book. And I also wonder how this experience, either the trail or the book or both, have changed what you see as hope for or believe is your legacy.
Right. So I've talked about my retirement years, or the next stage, if you will, phase of 5 A's I want to be. And the first one has surprised me, and maybe the trail helped uncover this, is that I want to be an artist. And I don't know, but I just keep seeing myself in like this big studio with canvases and sketchbooks and just creating, because I just feel like I heard Jim Carrey talking the other day, and he just had to get stuff out, and I don't know what that means, but I just want to get stuff out. The other thing is I have the confidence now to be an author. I have 2 other books that I can put together. So one of them is pretty wild as far as spiritually goes, that I can put there. So it's artist, author. I still want to be an adventurer. I want to be an athlete. And the only way I want to be an athlete is to keep my body fit enough so I can go on adventures. I'm not like talking about competing in any Olympics or, trying out for the NBA or anything like that. And then the last one is, I think with my authorship, there's a lot of things I see in the recovery community, the recovery world, the recovery space that irritate me. So that's me being self-aware. I'm going to write about that. And if I'm free from like, oh, this is CCAR's opinion, this is Phil Valentine, author, advocate, I want to write about that. So that's also artistry in and of itself, some type of art as well. Publishing the book and saying, wow, I managed to be able to go through that Kindle publishing thing and get my book up there to where it actually looks pretty good. I mean, I had a few bumps in the road, but I like the way it came out, that I could do that with other books, and I could also establish a blog. So, that's how I'm kind of seeing the next phase. Hey, Zoom user. Oh, you must be Gina, but you're just a Zoom user.
Is that what it's saying?
Yeah, it's under your
That's
name.
so weird. Oh, it wasn't working on my computer, so I'm on my phone.
Okay.
Hey, Phil. So I have a few questions. First of all, I've read most of your book, and I'm really enjoying it. Since I was a little girl growing up in Georgia, I've always wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail because it starts in Georgia, and I thought I could just go in my backyard and start exploring, and then I'd end up in Maine, and that would be like, it'd take a couple days and I'd be there. But it takes a lot of preparation and planning, and even like as a hiker today, I hiked part of the Appalachian Trail this year, but it takes a lot of planning. And I was wondering, my first question is like, could you tell us more about the like mental and physical preparation and planning that went into preparing for this journey before you took action and started hiking?
Right. So physical preparation is bullshit. It's absolutely, you don't need to prepare physically at all. And because Zach Davis talks about it in his book, it's more about how many miles you do and how you build yourself into it. So you could start really slowly and just test your body and just do as many as you can. But I'm so if you're in fairly decent shape, I mean, if you're really struggling, like obese or something like that, you might need to prepare yourself a little bit, but you can build yourself into the walk. And if you give yourself enough time, you can figure that out. Mentally, it's a whole different ball game. And I do think you need to prepare, but the way I prepared, and Sandy writes about this a little bit, she talks about it, is that I told everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you told everybody, that puts a lot of pressure on you to say, well, okay, this guy's been talking about it. Let's see what he's going to do. You know, it's like if you tell a lot of people you're in recovery, then it kind of puts a little pressure to say, well, maybe I just ought to stay in recovery one more day because a lot of people know I am. I don't want to be out of it. So, but for me, I also talked about being open to the outcome and not attached to it. So my goal was, if I could get myself to Springer Mountain, Georgia, and just start, that I would have a good foothold in completing the trail. Because a lot of people talk about it, and I talk, you know, it's like someday will never come, you know, someday means never. So, and if you really want to do it, Gina, put a date in the calendar, the date you're going to start. Put your date in the calendar, and that makes it real, the date you're going to go. Like Anitha and I and Stacy are considering going Qatar, and it didn't become real until you get that flight booked on that date, and then all of a sudden it's really real. All right, you're going. So if you do,
Awesome.
and you know, you work for an agency where there's some experience with having an employee go out on a sabbatical and a hike. So, you know,
That's true.
I'm not saying we're going to pay your salary, but you know, maybe there's some way we could work that out. We could talk about it.
Well, thanks for leading the way on that. I have one more question.
Yeah.
So as someone who's completed the Appalachian Trail, you just kind of talked earlier about what you might do in a couple of years. Do you think you would rather hike the AT again, or would you rather hike like a new trail, like the Pacific Crest Trail or something different?
So if I have the means and the ability, I would start on the Appalachian Trail again. And it only has to do with because of the way I feel connected to that current. It's a spiritual current. I do have, could I, by the time I'm 75, be a triple crowner, which is the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail. Because a couple of, like Cindy Loppers, who I mentioned early in the book, she was the one that first hotel room that I considered staying with. She's a triple crowner now. And she just finished the Continental Divide Trail this year. So that would be cool. But I'd also have to see what I'm called to, what my circumstances are. Because I'm telling you, once you get, and you have it in your blood, once you get a taste of what that feels like, the simplicity of life, the physical exercise, the spiritual connection, the connection to fellow travelers, it's extraordinary. The hiker community, the closest I've ever found to anything to it is the recovery community. It really is. But I would even say that people that have gone a long distance on the hike, on the trail, they are so filled with light and love and connection that they are remarkable, remarkable people to be around. It's just, like, I was sitting in the Cosmic Omelet having breakfast with our 77 BC, which is the class of 77 breakfast club. So there's like 10 people from the class of 77 still in Manchester. And the owner comes in with a new weight like server, and she says she just finished the trail in November. and her name was Gumby because she was so flexible. She's like a ballet dancer and all that. As soon as she saw me and I saw her, we connected like that.
Wow.
This level, because we do. You just know.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. It's kind of like that in recovery too.
Yeah.
That when you meet somebody in recovery, you just look and you just know.
Mhm.
You know, you just know. And so, what was your question?
You answered it. You answered it.
Oh, all right, cool.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Gina.
much.
I would love to see you do it someday, Gina. I'd be your biggest fan.
I think you will. Thanks.
All right, Neetha.
So just a quick question. How many years did you work at CCAR before the board agreed to give you a sabbatical and let you come back? Just before Khalees puts her request in, I just want to know how many years you had to do before you got
It was around 16.
Okay,
15,
Khalees, you're good to
16.
go. And then I actually have a question for Michael. Michael, how does having a leader who has had this experience impact you?
That's a good question. It motivates me, right? It's not gonna motivate me to walk no trail. I'm so sorry, guys.
I can't even get you to get a visa, a passport.
But it does motivate me in a sense of you know, him building up that courage to go, right? And it hasn't come across yet, but I know it's gonna come a time that I'm gonna have to use my courage, right? I'm gonna have to build up that my courage at a time. So, and maybe just looking back at what Phil did, right, and accomplished that, because I know I was, like I said, I was reading the book and I felt all these emotions, and I know at times he was scared. It was something that I felt too, that if I would have been in those situations, I would have been in the same in the same feelings.
Nathan, there's also Tammy, Gina, Brian, Barry, Lila,
Oh,
Don,
let
and
everybody have a bit.
Dermian that are all
I
like,
could- Yeah,
Come on, Brian.
I could share a little bit. I'll tell you what it does for me. I'll tell you what it does for me, and what it. So, you know, you've heard Phil talk about, you know, that spiritual place inside of him, and he has found a very strong connection, and how that felt when he was on the trail. And I got a question for you too about that. But so what it has done for me is it has allowed me to be more in tune with my intuitiveness, right, in the work that I do, and to believe in myself a little more. So I kind of feel a little bit, you know what I mean? So, and one of the things that Phil has helped me with is for me to slow down a little bit, because I'm more to react around certain situations. I oversee all the recovery community centers for CCAR. So there's 5 of them, and the young adult and family services. So it's a role to play, right? So, but and Phil supervised me for a little while, and what his spirituality has done for him, in turn has helped me is just to internalize things a little more, not to have all the answers, and sometimes just to pause, right? Pause in the moment, right? And be able to and then believe in the decisions that I make for the organization, for people, you know, and for the people that enter into our recovery community centers, and the support that we provide for them. So that's one thing. You know, there's a bunch of others, but I know there's a bunch of other staff on here, so I'll let them chime in too.
Go ahead, Don.
All right. Yeah. You know, it's interesting in reflecting about, you know, life before recovery was really run by fear and run by avoidance and run by all of these things. And then getting into recovery was moving towards a life of having faith that everything was going to be okay. And I came into CCAR not really understanding the faith that I had in that kind of thing, but being part of an organization with a leader that's like living, I want to say living live without a net, you know, it's, you know, it just models that as an employee to say, okay, I can make decisions that are based on positive construction things that are based in, you know, faith that things will be okay and that things will turn out the way that they're supposed to be, and that I know that I can live this life the way that I'm supposed to, versus living a life based on fear and a professional life based on fear, where it's like, oh, I don't want to try that, I might get into trouble for it, or I don't want to do this thing, oh, I might get shot down for it, or oh, I don't want to stick my head up because then they might notice me and fire me. You know, there's an organization that runs on faith that things will work out really gives a lot of room to breathe with trying different things, people listening to you, and the honest ability to say, well, we tried this thing, it's not working, let's veer it this way, let's go with what helps the organization best. And I think that that's really inspirational, because it hadn't happened in my professional life before this, really. You know, there were small glimpses of it, but this is really a finely tuned organization that lives by those principles because of that leadership.
Oh, thanks, Don. Tammy.
Hi, everybody. It's very refreshing to know Phil. I've always felt that we had a spiritual connection from day one, to be honest. I always, in my life, my entire life, I have been a Christian, and I have lived by those principles. And they've helped me with my strength. They've helped me live worry-free. I can relate to a lot of things that Phil is saying. But most of all, he's just a breath of fresh air for us as far as our confidence, like Don said and Brian said, that he's continuously always building us up and making us feel like we can do the things that we desire to do in life. And for that, I'm very grateful. My confidence has definitely grown over the years I've been with CCAR. Just being a person of compassion, you know, and empathy as well, learning all of those at another scale, I would say. Deeper love for other people. You definitely learn that at CCAR as well. Commitment, loyalty, all of those things are elevated. So thank you. Thank you for being a part of our life, Phil.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Tammy. Gina.
Sorry, it's just really inspiring to see, to have a leader in an organization that, no pun intended, but really walks the walk and doesn't just talk the talk. I've been in a lot of other jobs previously that have been really like corporate environments where, you know, people can be in a leadership position all day long and just preach from a place of authority and shout from the mountaintop. Gosh, I have all these like metaphors that are perfect. Shout from the mountaintop and be like, do this, do that. But that's like Phil will say, like, leaders make good leaders. And, you know, he really just leads by example and inspires and does cool things that, like, you know, I've wanted to do. So it's awesome to know people like that.
Thanks, Gina. Megan.
Yes, so just we're on the Phil's Awesome Festival train. And I actually have
awkward.
Well, I'm gonna make you awkward a little bit longer and then I'll switch gears for you if you okay. But it is just listening to everybody reflecting, I do have to say that your leadership is one of the most profound gifts I think that you give to others, and the huge impact that's had on developing me as a leader. It like, I don't even know that I could put words to that. And then I'm now in a role where I'm helping to develop other leaders in a more concrete way, and sort of coming into my own as a bot. One of my longtime most amazing friends, Elizabeth, just said to me recently, because I now have like employees in my organization, which is crazy. And she's one of them. She's like, you're just giving off mad boss vibes now. Right. Like, because couldn't step into that role before. I couldn't sort of be that person. And so, yeah, it's making me reflect, listening to people that your impact on me has you've had a huge impact on me being able to step into that in our relationship over the years. So that's amazing. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And now I'm just going to bring us all right back down. I'm going to pop that bubble and ask you two very practical questions. The one is, how did you remember all this stuff? Because in the book, there's a point at which you say something about like not having your notebook or not recording in a notebook or whatever. And so when I read that, I was like, how the hell did he remember all this stuff then? So that's one question. And the other is the profound physical discomfort that comes with some aspects of living like you did for that length of time on the trail. I love my comforts. I love being comfortable. I love having a comfortable chair, and I like being warm, and I like having yummy, delicious food at my fingertips all the time. And so as reading the book, I'm like, gosh, how do you endure sort of a lack of comfort, and is it an adjustment? What does that look like? So those are my two last questions.
So what was the first one? I was thinking about comfort.
How'd you remember everything?
Oh, how do I remember everything? So there's a book written by AWOL. It's called the AWOL Guide, and it's on Amazon, but we carried that because it showed you everything on the trail, where all the roads were crossed, where the shelters are, where the water is. And I would make a note in that about where I stopped and kind of record the miles and stuff like that. But I didn't have any other notes, but I had an iPhone with 5,000 pictures on it. So from the trail. So like anytime I was writing the book, I could go to that dated photos and go, oh yeah. And as soon as I saw the pictures, I felt exactly where I was. I remember who I was with. I remember what I was feeling even. I can even still go, like, I think we drove somewhere and I stepped on the trail. I think it was up in Mass, like in Lee or something like that. And I walked on the trail like 100 yards, and I was like remembering exactly what I felt like, where I was, all that stuff. I remembered the spot exactly. It's almost like transported in time. And so the pictures do that for me as well, even when I look at them today, 7 years later. The discomfort. Well, Paradox taught me that profound thing I wrote in the book is that if you eat the best thing in your food bag, you're always eating the best thing in your food bag. I mean, it sounds so ridiculously stupid, but it's brilliant, because you think about it in your own home. If you always eat the best thing in your refrigerator, you're always eating the best thing in your refrigerator. And maybe you have your choices, that jar of pickles or the jar of French mustard. Well, I'm going to choose the pickles because that's the best thing in my bag, in my refrigerator. All right. I'm eating the best thing I have. Well, when it comes to comfort, the physical comfort in blisters and stuff, I don't know, Cindy Loppers told me early on that something hurts every day. So that is just a form of acceptance. And, that really hasn't changed much since the trail. I'm 63 years old. Something hurts every day. So I just figure out what's going to hurt today, and you just move on with that and go from there. But for the comfort, you know, you would learn to find out which kind of log is the best to sit on, or what type of ground or the rock you're going to sit on. And those became comfort, so that when you actually got like a bag chair at some Trail Magic, you went, whoa, this is a great chair. But I splurged on one item, my sleeping pad. It was a Neotherm Thermarest, and it was like $300, you know, for just a sleeping pad that I blew up every night. But if you got that right, it became like my luxury hotel suite, because it was so comfortable that you'd lay down and you go, oh, I'm home. This is wonderful. And so when you start to figure out those kind of things, you really appreciate that you're out from the weather, you're in a little tent, that it's just beautiful. I ate the best thing in my food bag. I might have even actually on a bonus day had a little orange Gatorade powder to mix in with my water. Woo! That was like incredible. Life doesn't get any better than that. And we would all support each other like with those ideas, that you can be incredibly grateful for the things you just have on your back. You know, like, wow. So, you know, and the pain and the fatigue after a long day, you know, like you walk 15, 18 rugged miles, you know what that did for me? I'm going to sleep really good tonight. And I did, you know, there was no doubt that I was so worn out that, you know, I still think that's the cure for insomnia, right? You have cure for insomnia? Well, let's go out into the woods and hike 25 miles. You think you'll sleep well that night? You know, it might be a little extreme example, but a lot of times we get so worked up in our minds without exercising our body. It's our bodies that need rest to restore. So we need to work our bodies so we can sleep well. And that's been true with me. If I've had a long day in front of the screens and haven't gotten out for a walk, I don't sleep well that night. You know, I wake up a lot, but if I'm even able to get out in the cold and or in the weather or whatever, and Buddy and I do just 3 miles or something, like a short walk, then I sleep so much better. Something's that simple. Which reminds me, I should probably go for a walk today. I haven't taken him for a walk lately. He's a little rambunctious.
I think I just want to speak to that really quick, because it's such a profound lesson about the discomfort and about acceptance. And it just makes me think about my daughter and I. She has a chronic illness, a genetic disorder, and there were years that she was just really, really sick as a teenager. And we came up with this saying of, it's the new okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So whatever she was facing or we had to go through together on any given day, well, this is just the new definition of okay.
Yeah. She seems
And
to
we
be
had to
doing a lot.
constantly adjust and adjust and adjust and adapt. And as long as we had the mindset that it was okay, then it could be okay. So whatever is the best thing in your bag, I just have to embrace that that is the best thing.
Right.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. It makes choosing your food a lot simpler too, because people would like pick out their meal for, this is my breakfast on Monday, this is my lunch on Monday. Oh, these are my snacks between breakfast and lunch. And they'd have them all organized. Dr. Pickles was that way. It drove me freaking nuts. And he and I would kid about it. But I was like, I'd sit down, open my bag, and I know you find this hard to believe. I'd just rummage through it and say, this is the best thing. I'm eating this. Even if it was like, I don't care. It's always the best thing in my bag. So you come down to that last foil packet of garlic pepper tuna and go, do I really want to eat this? Maybe I could wait till town to get something, but it was the best thing in my bag. I'm like saying, why did I even buy garlic pepper tuna? Ugh. You know, those little foil packs, so you don't have to open cans. Those are big on the trail. Michael, you said you had questions. We got 9 minutes.
I know we got 9 minutes. I got one good question for you, and it is, on those 6 months, what was the greatest lesson that you learned?
Continue. It's easy, Michael. I mean, because and I think why that word is so profound was that, and it goes into a little bit, I talked a little bit about like procrastination, but when I'm feeling fear, it wasn't always my go-to to walk through it. It was to avoid it. And that's kind of what fed my addiction, right? That alcohol and drugs took away my anxiety and my fear, instead of like learning to cope with it or learning to deal with it or talk to somebody about it that could help me with it, find out that I wasn't the only one. So when I was worn out, fearful, whatever, and it applies to life, it applies to work, just continue, because time is continuing, you really don't have any choice. I mean, you have choice, but time is going to proceed with or without you acting. I mean, so I want to, fill the time I have left. And when you're faced with your own mortality, like I was back in March with the death of my parents, I want to fill the time I have left with adventure, artistry, authorship, if you will. And it's really about adventure too, because I think when you think about, and this is the other lesson that is, we are all traveling together on a space rock, we have a giant space rock. We're all traveling on it. I can think of no other meaning, and I've been searching for it for years. A lot of us talk about purpose, and purpose is different than meaning for me. But the meaning of life, and why I think God put me on this planet and all of us, is to enjoy the ride on the space rock. We got to learn to figure out how to enjoy the ride. And now I do think we have a couple obligations, is if we can, to make the ride more enjoyable for others. And the second one is to leave our space rock in good enough condition that others can enjoy the ride when they get put on here too. So that's kind of something I took from the trail, because when I was out there, when I was out there on the trail, I learned to enjoy the ride. And when you enjoy the ride the most is, I've become such an observer of clouds. How many of you have looked at the clouds and have looked at the sky? And when you're at night and the stars are out, and the times we stayed up past hiker midnight, dark, and laid on our back outside and looked at the stars. Oh my gosh, that's enjoying the ride. We are on a rock in space, spinning around, hurtling around the sun, going like a speed we can't even comprehend. And most of us aren't even aware that we're on the ride that you cannot possibly imagine until you look around you. And look at our spaceship. Look we can travel all over this spaceship that's Mount Washington behind me. You can go visit places like that where it's just really amazing. Or you can go out in your woods, or you can go out tonight on your deck when it gets dark and look at the stars and go, where are we going, God? What is this about? And we're not the first people to ever look at the heavens and go, what the hell? I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, oh my gosh, what is out there? And why are we on this rock at this time? And just, those are just the life's questions. But I don't think we got put on this planet or born to be miserable. I didn't get sober to be miserable. And if we're not enjoying what we do, so I've learned that I can have profound spiritual, mystical enjoyment, like doing something like a hike. Why wouldn't I pursue that in the time I have left? Why not? Is that selfish? I don't know. I don't know. I I can think of no other reason.
Awesome. Are you still in contact with any other people that you hiked with?
Oh yeah. I had lunch with Rocksteady and her husband, who's looks like he's going to be a general in the army now. He's up to like the colonel and being considered to be a general. Look up Luzader Studios on Instagram, Luzader, Luzader Studios. That's Brian Luzader. That's Dr. Pickles. And he has his own gallery in Asheville, which he talked about all the time. So I did leave that part out of the book, now that that's a question, but we talked about his business and being an artist. And oh my gosh, I wrote about it in the epilogue, but he is amazing and he's doing really well. He's still married to Mockingbird. They have no kids. They choose that way. Just Doug and I see each other every couple of years. Still retired, family of 6, five girls and a boy. And Paradox just had a baby girl last week. So
Awesome.
that's their first child. So Paradox is now a mom. And I don't think I left those were the key people. So yeah. And when we see each other, it's almost like we hiked like 10 miles, but we didn't see each other. We stopped at the same campsite and we pick up the conversation, just like you just know each other at that level. That's what an incredible, incredible gift that is, to know people that well, to feel that close to them. Yeah. So thank you all. I thoroughly enjoyed all of this. I mean, it was, it is an emotional time for me, and to think about, I guess it all boils down to about love. And when you're on the trail, you see how much your higher power loves you. You see how much love that you can let in, for me, which was huge. You can see how that when you let that love in, it gives you the ability to love others. And then you can see that, and this is, I never ever thought I'd be some hokey, environmentalist, but the idea of how I think we're called to love our planet, to love our spaceship, and to take care of it. And so I think it turned me into that too.
That's awesome. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Phil, for writing this book,
Oh,
and for drawing up the courage to even take that first step.
I do have a request. I'm well on my way to selling tens and tens of copies. So we're probably approaching the 250 mark, like worldwide of international sales, 250 copies or so. But there are 28 Amazon reviews. And if you have not written an Amazon review, that would really, really help me. I'd certainly appreciate it. Oh, and by the way, it makes a good Christmas or holiday gift, should I say? A good holiday gift. No, just messing with you.
So stupid.
I am so stupid, right?
Oh, my mic's on. I'm sorry.
Bill,
You're absolutely right.
He knows I love him. He knows I love him.
Bill, you need to get in that CCAR studio and make a proper continue infomercial.
Yeah, we've done a little bit of that. So, yeah, but like I said, it's not like my retirement hinges on selling 1 million copies or anything like that. It would certainly be nice, but we are given a portion, Sandy and I, a portion of all the sales back to CCAR too, because for what they did to me. So that will continue for as long as the book is out there and selling. So who knows? It might be one of those books, right? That that when I pass away, all of a sudden, oh, he wrote a book. Let's go. Yeah. Well, it's out there now. A sleeper, right? All right. No, Don. Garlic pepper tuna does not ever sound tasty. Trust in on that. Trust. Bye, everybody. Have a sparkling day.